On Christmas Day, my grown children handed me a trash bag and told me to leave the house I built for them. No warning, no shame. Just rage over the man I dared to love after 20 years alone. But 3 months later, when they came back begging for shelter, guess whose door I didn't open, and guess who got the eviction notice instead? The scent of cinnamon and pine still lingered in the air when Eleanor heard the door click shut behind her. It was supposed to be a Christmas of warmth, a quiet miracle even. After 20 years of widowhood and silence, she'd finally found someone who made the days feel less long and the nights less hollow. His name was Tom, a retired history teacher with a love for antique books and the kind of gentle humor that didn't need to be loud to be heard. She had brought him to the family Christmas gathering with a tray of gingerbread and a hopeful heart, but the moment he stepped into the living room beside her, smiles turned to stares. Lucas, her eldest, didn't even bother to mask his disdain. "What is this?" he asked, as if Tom were a stain on the carpet. Bree set down her wineglass so hard it clinked against the marble. "Mom, are you serious?" Sean, the youngest, didn't speak at first. He just crossed his arms and let the storm gather. "I thought this was our family Christmas," Lucas said, his voice edged with ice. "Not some dating showcase." Eleanor's hands trembled, but she kept her smile. "This is Tom. I wanted you to meet—" "You wanted to parade your boyfriend like a teenager with a prom date?" Bree snapped. "Do you even realize how embarrassing this is?" "I waited until today because I wanted it to be special," Eleanor said, her voice low but steady. "Because you matter to me. Because he does too." Sean finally spoke. "Did he talk you into signing over the house? Is that what this is about?" "What?" Eleanor blinked, stunned. "No." "We saw the way he was looking around," Bree said. "Sizing up the place. Probably knows exactly how much the property's worth." Eleanor turned to Tom, whose gentle smile hadn't faltered despite the rising hostility. He stepped forward, extending a hand. "It's lovely to meet you all. I didn't mean to intrude." Lucas didn't take the hand. "You didn't mean to intrude?" he scoffed. "You're ruining our family's reputation. People talk, Mom. You don't get to start over like this. Not now." "I'm not asking for your permission," Eleanor said. "Just your respect." "You already had our respect," Bree hissed, "until you decided to throw it away for some man." Tom placed a steadying hand on Eleanor's back. She shook her head. "I've done nothing wrong. I have every right—" Lucas cut her off. "You've lost your mind. If Dad were alive—" "He's not," Eleanor said quietly. "He's been gone 20 years. And for the first time, the room went silent. Then Sean walked over to the entry table, picked up her coat, and thrust it into her arms. "You need to go," he said coldly. "This house doesn't welcome you anymore." For a moment, Eleanor stood frozen, still holding the tin of gingerbread she'd baked for them, still wearing the scarf Bree had given her 3 Christmases ago, still believing this was the day they might accept her happiness. She looked at each of her children, their faces set in stone. Then she turned, placed the tin gently on the table, and said the only words her dignity allowed. "I hope one day you remember what it feels like to be alone in a room full of people you love." She stepped into the cold with Tom beside her, snow crunching beneath their feet. The porch lights flickered in the wind. Behind them, the house that once overflowed with laughter and birthday parties and late-night lullabies now stood like a stranger. Tom didn't say a word. He simply opened the car door and helped her in, like someone who understood that silence is sometimes the last piece of armor a person has left. As they pulled away, Eleanor looked back just once. They'd given her a Christmas gift she would never forget. But in time, she would return the favor. After Frank died, Eleanor learned how grief echoes differently in silence. She didn't get to collapse or rage or disappear into a bottle of wine like the widows on TV. She had Lucas, Bree, and Sean staring at her with hollow eyes. The mortgage didn't care about her heartbreak, neither did the gas bill, nor the school lunches. So she learned how to fold her sorrow into the corners of a casserole dish. She wept quietly while doing laundry. When Bree had night terrors, Eleanor would lie beside her until she fell asleep, staring at the ceiling, her hand numb but unmoving. When Lucas broke his arm, Eleanor worked a double shift to afford the surgery bill not covered by insurance. When Sean forgot his science fair project, she stayed up gluing popsicle sticks at 2 a.m. Everyone called her strong, but no one asked if she was tired. She hadn't even considered dating. For a long time, she wore her wedding band like a lock. Friends nudged her, some gently, some not. "You're still young," they'd say. "You deserve companionship." She would smile and change the subject. Even when Lucas left for college, when Bree started her nursing program, when Sean finally got his driver's license, Eleanor never wavered from her routine. She kept the fridge stocked, sent care packages, took extra shifts at the community hospital cafeteria. Their happiness was the shape of her life. But there were small cracks, moments she'd never admit even to herself. The way her fingers lingered a beat too long on her own wrist when the nights got especially long. The way she envied couples slow dancing at weddings, even the clumsy ones. The aching truth that her identity had become singular. Mom. Then came the day she met Tom. It was raining. She had gone to the library to return a cookbook. In the poetry aisle, a section she hadn't visited in years, she overheard a soft, steady voice. "Do you think Emily Dickinson wrote, 'Hope is the thing with feathers, to comfort herself or someone else?'" She turned. He had a gray wool coat, glasses sliding down his nose, and a volume of Dickinson opened between his palms. He looked up at her as if waiting for an honest answer, not small talk. "I think both," Eleanor replied after a pause. He smiled. "Good answer." They ran into each other again the following week. This time, she was looking for gardening memoirs. He was reading Frost. She didn't tell anyone, not even her sister. It felt sacred, like finding a forgotten melody inside her own ribcage. Their friendship unfolded like a slow sonata. Long walks, coffee on library benches, trading favorite lines of poetry. She learned Tom was a retired history teacher, widowed 10 years. His daughter Carla worked at a community center. He lived simply, loved old movies, made incredible hot cocoa, and carried silence like it was a kind of grace. When he offered to help her repot her indoor succulents one weekend, she said yes. By the time he left, her hands smelled like rosemary, and her laughter, real, unforced laughter, had returned for the first time in years. Still, Eleanor didn't breathe a word to her children. Because she knew them. Lucas was obsessed with appearances. Bree had inherited Frank's distrust of outsiders. Sean had once joked, "If Mom ever dates again, I'm leaving the country." So she kept Tom hidden like a childhood secret. It wasn't shame, it was strategy. She told herself, "Let them see how kind he is first. Let them taste how happy I am. They'll understand." But they wouldn't. She would learn that too late. 1 month before Christmas, Tom bought her an antique wooden comb at a flea market. "It reminded me of you," he said. "Classic, strong, beautiful, underappreciated." That night, she cried in the bathtub. Not out of sadness, but because for the first time in decades, someone saw her, not as a role, not as a resource, but as a woman with warmth, with worth, with stories. She started planning how to introduce him. She knitted Bree a new scarf. She bought a collector's jazz vinyl for Sean. She printed out old movie tickets to gift Lucas, tokens from family nights he had long forgotten, but she never had. She wanted to remind them, "We were once close. This isn't betrayal. It's just a new chapter." But they wouldn't see it that way. And she had no idea that her carefully prepared gifts, handwritten notes, and warm gingerbread would never be opened. That the home she'd spent decades holding together would turn against her. That the people she gave everything to would accuse her of trying to steal what she built, for daring to build a little happiness of her own. The day after Christmas, Eleanor didn't touch the tin of gingerbread she had brought back untouched from Lucas's home. It sat on the kitchen counter like a sealed time capsule of good intentions that had gone sour. Tom offered to warm up soup, but she shook her head. She wasn't hungry, Not for food, not for comfort, not even for words. Instead, she retreated to the back room, the one she hadn't cleaned in years. It still smelled faintly of mothballs and lavender sachets, its corners crammed with old boxes, binders, and bags of memories she'd promised to go through someday. That day had finally come. She pulled down the oldest box first, labeled Lucas HS to college. Inside, medical forms, football team photos, tuition deposit slips, even a crumpled note. Mom, I know I got in because of you. Thank you. That was the first and last time he said thank you for anything. Beneath the papers was a manila folder filled with statements, withdrawals for his restaurant launch, co-signed loan paperwork she had paid off quietly when the business folded, utility bills from the apartment he forgot to pay. Eleanor sifted through each item like she was examining a crime scene she hadn't known she was part of. Next came Bree's folder, pink, once adorned with stickers, rent payments, community college transcripts, daycare deposits she had made, just until Bree's next paycheck came. Eleanor had paid for 3 years of Bree's licensing courses, and later, Emma's private tutoring when Bree was too tapped out. And Sean? His folder was the thickest. At first it was just driving school receipts and music lessons. Then it grew darker, rehab bills, overdraft coverage, credit card charges at online gaming sites. His thank yous had always come with a catch. You're the only one I trust, Mom. Eleanor sat on the floor, surrounded by paper, and understood something for the first time. She hadn't raised children. She had cultivated dependents. Dependents who had come to equate her love with lifelines. And the moment she dared to have a life that didn't orbit them, they didn't get angry. They got scared. Because if she was no longer the one keeping everything afloat, who would be? She stood and reached into the bottom of the cabinet drawer, pulling out a smaller box, one even she had forgotten. It held the house deed, the house she had worked 2 jobs to keep, the one Frank had wanted to leave to her, so she'd never have to worry. She stared at the documents for a long time. None of her children had contributed a cent to its maintenance in 20 years. Yet at Christmas, they had spoken of it like it was theirs, a guaranteed inheritance, a reward for their existence. That night she made tea but let it go cold. She didn't speak much to Tom, who waited in the living room, flipping slowly through one of her gardening books. Eventually she joined him, curling beside him on the couch. "They think I'm weak," she said quietly. "No," he replied. "They know you're strong. That's why they're angry, because strong means they can't control you anymore." She stared into the dim light of the fireplace. The shadows cast on the wall looked like dancers from a life she had never auditioned for. "I'm tired, Tom," she whispered. "Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind of tired that comes from realizing maybe I was never really seen." He took her hand and didn't try to fix it. He just held on. The next morning, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, bills and documents spread out like armor. She opened her laptop and created a spreadsheet. Date, amount, purpose, recipient. She began logging every dollar, every payment, every silent sacrifice. It took hours, but by the end, there it was, in black and white. Over the years, she had loaned or spent over $178,000 directly on her children, not including groceries, last-minute needs, or co-signed leases. She exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Then she opened a new tab and started a draft email to her lawyer. The subject line: property consultation. Urgent. There was one final thing to retrieve. She walked to the hallway closet and reached behind the winter coats. Taped to the back panel was a small envelope, Frank's last letter. She hadn't read it in years. "Ellie," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm sorry I left you alone. But I know you'll be strong. You always have been. Don't spend your life only as a mother. You're more than that. Find someone who brings you peace. And whatever you do, make sure they see you, the real you." Eleanor folded the letter and placed it beside the deed. She wasn't just going to be seen. She was going to act. The message came 3 days after Christmas. It wasn't from any of her children directly. It was from Janice, her neighbor, who sent a screenshot via text. It was a Facebook post. Public. Bree had shared a filtered family photo under a glowing tree, her caption stark. We've chosen peace this year. Some people prefer strangers over their own blood. We prefer not to watch our mother self-destruct. Please respect our decision to distance for now. Eleanor stared at it for a long moment. She wasn't tagged, but it didn't matter. The message was unmistakable. Beneath it were likes and comments from friends, co-workers, and relatives. Some offered generic sympathy. Others joined the scorn. So sorry, Bree. Can't imagine how painful it must be watching your mother fall for a manipulator. You're doing the right thing, protecting your family's legacy. Legacy. That word twisted in Eleanor's chest. She hadn't even told anyone outside the family about Tom. And yet now the entire town seemed to know, or believe, that she was either losing her mind or getting scammed. Tom sat beside her at the table, silent, his hand resting gently atop hers. They want to control the narrative, he said softly. They already are, she whispered. Sean didn't post anything, but he did something worse. He emptied the joint savings account they shared, the one she'd opened years ago when he entered rehab, just in case of emergencies. It had less than $2,000 in it. Now it had 6 cents. No call, no explanation. Just gone. Eleanor stared at the bank alert, blinking at the line. Online transfer completed. SEAND. She didn't cry, not this time. Instead, she printed the statement and added it to her new binder. Unreciprocated debts. On New Year's Eve, the silence was the loudest it had ever been. No calls, no messages, no invitations. Just Tom and a cup of warm cider on the porch. He tried to lighten the mood. Should we dance in the driveway at midnight? She smiled faintly. Only if the neighbors promised not to report a disturbance. They clinked their mugs, and when the fireworks began, Eleanor made a silent vow. This year would be different. This year she would not apologize for being alive. The following week, Lucas finally broke his silence, but only after losing a key investor in his tech startup. He called, sounding almost civil. Mom, can we meet? Eleanor agreed, but only in public. She chose a small cafe near the courthouse. Tom came with her, waiting discreetly at a nearby table. Lucas arrived in a blazer and jeans, looking tense but rehearsed. He didn't hug her, didn't even smile. I've been thinking, he began. We got off on the wrong foot during the holidays. Eleanor nodded once. Yes, we did. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, I know things have been strained, but I wanted to be honest. We were shocked. We weren't expecting you to bring someone into the family without a heads up. She raised an eyebrow. I wasn't asking for permission. I know. I'm just saying, maybe if we'd had time to prepare, we wouldn't have reacted that way. And the Facebook post? She asked calmly. Lucas blinked. That was Bree. I didn't sign off on that. But you didn't stop it either. He looked down. It's been hard. Business is rough right now. I lost a lot this quarter. And honestly, I'm just worried about you. There it was. The soft launch of manipulation. Eleanor leaned back. You're worried, yet you said I was ruining our family's name. He exhaled sharply. We were emotional. It was Christmas. I was humiliated, she said. On Christmas. He didn't respond. Instead, he changed the subject. I heard the house might be listed. Is that true? She smiled. You heard correctly. He stiffened. But, Mom, that house is part of our legacy. There's that word again, she said. Funny how no one cared about the roof repairs last year, or the plumbing, but now suddenly it's sacred. I just think you're acting rashly. No, she said, standing. I'm finally acting clearly. She left before he could follow her. Outside, the sky was the color of storm water, and Tom was waiting with a quiet nod. In the car, she said nothing, just stared ahead, the wheels humming softly beneath them. At home, she opened her laptop and finished what she'd started, emails to her bank, her lawyer, and the financial advisor Frank had once used. Then she poured herself a glass of wine, one she didn't share, didn't pour for anyone else. Because this was the first time in decades she was drinking to herself. In early January, the garden was still asleep, a canvas of frost and bone-white branches. But Eleanor found herself drawn to it daily, clippers in hand, as though tending to its silence helped her hear her own. She moved slowly, methodically, trimming dead limbs from rose bushes that hadn't bloomed since Frank's funeral. Some roots, she knew, still held life. Others were just rot, clinging on for the sake of familiarity, just like parts of her. She thought back to a winter 21 years ago, days after the funeral. Lucas had caught the flu and missed his college entrance interview. Bree had locked herself in the bathroom, sobbing that she couldn't focus on finals. Sean was still in middle school, asking nightly if Dad was coming back, as a ghost. Eleanor didn't sleep that month. She managed casseroles, laundry, counseling appointments, and church. She declined every offer of help. "You're so strong," people kept saying, but what they meant was, "Thank you for making this easier for the rest of us." What they didn't know was that each night she sat alone in the laundry room and sobbed into clean towels, not out of grief. Out of the dawning knowledge that her life, from that point on, would be lived entirely in reaction to others. That realization became a scar she never named. She remembered her mother, too. An immigrant from Portugal who had scrubbed motel floors for 30 years and died before retirement. Her hands were always cracked, her back always sore, but she never complained. "You do it for family," she used to say. "Family is your worth." That belief had been passed down like an heirloom, a woman's value measured not in joy, but in sacrifice. Eleanor had swallowed that creed whole, until now. She stared down at her fingers, dirt-caked and trembling from cold. What had all those sacrifices bought her? Silence, entitlement, children who believed her love was a default setting, a house full of memories that no longer felt like home. She went back inside and pulled an old photo album off the shelf, the one labeled Before. Before widowhood, before the grind, before she lost her name to just Mom. There was a photo of her on her honeymoon, laughing in a straw hat, another of her painting in a college art class, something she'd stopped entirely after marriage. There were pages of beach trips, girls' nights, birthday cakes she had made for Frank. By the end of the album, the photos became less frequent, more of the kids, less of her. She wasn't just aging in those pictures, she was vanishing. Later that evening, Eleanor took out a notepad and began making a new list. Things I once loved. Opera on Sunday afternoons, painting floral studies, the way rosemary smells when it rains, laughing without checking if someone else needs something, walking barefoot on warm pavement, writing poetry in the margins of newspapers. She paused. When was the last time she did any of these? Tom walked into the room just as she was staring out the window. He didn't ask. He never did. He simply placed a warm mug of tea beside her and joined her in silence. "I gave everything," she said softly. "I know. And they still think it wasn't enough." Tom didn't respond, because they both knew the truth. To her children, enough would always be whatever kept her small, quiet, and convenient. The next morning, Eleanor visited the community center where Carla, Tom's daughter, worked. Carla was running a small, mature women's roundtable initiative, and she invited Eleanor to join. At first, Eleanor declined. "I don't have much to say," she said. Carla smiled kindly. "That's usually a sign you have more to say than most." The first meeting was modest. 7 women, all over 50, all quietly brave. One was a nurse who had divorced her husband after 35 years of quiet misery. Another was a widow who had come out at 64 and moved in with her best friend. A third had cut ties with her abusive son. When it was Eleanor's turn, she simply said, "I spent 20 years making sure everyone around me didn't fall apart." And now I'm trying to figure out what it means that I did. The women nodded. No one interrupted. And in that silence, Eleanor felt something she hadn't in years, heard, seen, not as a mother, not as a burden, but as a woman carrying the historical cost of invisibility and choosing finally to put it down. The sky was flat and gray the morning Eleanor drove to the bank. She wore her favorite green wool coat, the one Tom said made her look like a pine tree in winter, and carried a folder thick with paperwork, property deeds, account summaries, and a new will, freshly printed and unsigned. Her hands didn't shake as they used to when she faced serious decisions. They were still, precise, the hands of someone who'd stopped waiting for permission. The bank manager, a kindly woman named Jessa, welcomed her with a hesitant smile. They had known each other for years. Jessa had seen Eleanor come in to co-sign student loans, authorize emergency transfers, and once, to unfreeze a card after Sean lost it on a Vegas trip. "I'd like to revoke all secondary account holders," Eleanor said, her tone clear. Jessa blinked. "All of them?" Eleanor nodded. "Lucas, Bree, Sean, I want every tie cut. No notifications, no override rights, no access." There was a beat of silence. "I also want bill alert tracking on every outgoing payment over $500, she added. Jessa gave a slow nod. "We'll take care of it right away." As Jessa keyed in the commands, Eleanor watched each name disappear from the screen, like phantoms being exorcised. When she walked out an hour later, the winter air didn't feel so cold. That afternoon, she texted all 3 children. "All secondary cards are deactivated. Please manage your own finances moving forward. I won't be available for monetary assistance. I wish you all well." No further explanation, no apology, no "I hope you understand." Just closure. Sean responded first. "What the hell? Are you serious? What am I supposed to do about rent?" She didn't reply. Breeze came an hour later. "You've always said family comes first. I guess now that you've got him, we don't matter." No response. Lucas said nothing. But 3 hours later, Tom's phone buzzed with a blocked call. He declined it. "They'll reach out to me next," he said quietly. Eleanor shook her head. "They won't get to you. Not this time." That night, she signed the final line of her revised will. She'd left a small, fair sum to each child, enough for a gesture, but not a lifeline. The bulk of her estate would go into a community trust under Carla's nonprofit, scholarships for mature women returning to school, and emergency funds for single mothers over 50. Tom watched her seal the envelope and said, "This will upset them." Eleanor met his eyes. "Good. Maybe for once they'll sit with discomfort instead of handing it to me." The next day, Bree showed up at her door, coat unbuttoned, mascara already running. "You're really doing this," she said, before Eleanor even opened the screen door. "You're really throwing us away for him." Eleanor didn't answer right away. She just looked at her daughter, saw the panic behind the spite. "I'm not throwing anyone away," she said. "I'm stepping out of the role you never wanted to admit I had the right to leave." Bree's jaw tightened. "You raised us to depend on you." "I raised you because I loved you," Eleanor replied. "But love doesn't mean I owe you my life." "You're being manipulated." Eleanor smiled gently. "No, Bree. I'm just done being managed." Bree's eyes glistened. "You won't even help with Emma's school anymore?" "Emma is innocent," Eleanor said, "and I'll always make sure she's okay. But you have to figure out how to stand on your own." Bree's lips parted, then closed. No words came. Eleanor stepped forward, reached out, and softly placed her hand on Bree's shoulder. "You can be angry, but you no longer get to decide who I am." Bree turned without another word and walked down the steps. Eleanor watched her go, heart thudding, not from fear, but from the strange ache of liberation. That evening, she and Tom sat on the porch with 2 glasses of red wine. The air was sharp but clear. "You were strong," he said. "I wasn't," Eleanor replied. "I was finally honest." She took a long sip and stared at the horizon. She had said no, and for the first time in her life, that word felt like the start of something, not the end. By February, the silence from Eleanor's children wasn't just emotional, it was logistical. Lucas missed 2 mortgage payments and quietly listed his Tesla for sale. His startup had lost its primary investor, and in a closed-door meeting, he'd been replaced as project lead. Bree, unable to cover Emma's after-school program and rent in the same month, began staying later at the hospital for overtime shifts, dragging Emma from room to room like a shadow. Sean moved into a friend's basement, where the Wi-Fi barely worked, and the only privacy was a curtain hung on a string. He began calling Eleanor's number late at night, letting it ring once before hanging up. None of them would say it outright, but they were struggling. And more than that, they were confused, because for the first time in their lives, their mother wasn't rushing in to fix it. Eleanor saw the signs from afar. The mutual friends who stopped waving, the neighbor who awkwardly changed the topic when Bree's name came up. Even Tom's daughter, Carla, mentioned it during dinner one evening. "Word's getting around," she said. "People are realizing your kids don't call, don't check in. It's starting to reflect badly on them." Eleanor didn't smile, but something quiet settled in her chest. Not vengeance, validation. Meanwhile, her own days began to shift. The morning coffee now included a crossword and a brief walk to the community garden. She and Tom volunteered to organize a local film series for seniors. And during a screening of Roman Holiday, Eleanor laughed so loudly she startled herself. For the first time in decades, her laughter wasn't tempered by fear of being too much. One afternoon, while trimming a lavender bush on her porch, she received a delivery, a handwritten invitation to a podcast recording on midlife, reclamation, and reinvention. The host had heard about her from Carla. "We'd love your voice," the note said. "The story of a woman who finally chose herself." Tom encouraged her to accept, so she did. On the day of the taping, Eleanor wore a soft maroon sweater and a brooch shaped like a sprouting branch. The host, a young woman named Devon, welcomed her warmly. "What would you say was the turning point?" Devon asked midway through the interview. Eleanor thought for a moment, then said, "When I was told to leave the home I built, I realized it was never really mine. It was theirs, and only as long as I played by their rules. So I left the house. But more importantly, I left their rules behind." Devon nodded. "And what did you gain?" Eleanor's voice didn't tremble. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Eleanor heard the knock. Not the polite tap of a neighbor or the casual rhythm of a delivery. This one was hesitant, then firmer, like someone unsure if they were welcome. She opened the door to find Lucas standing there, shoulders slumped, hair a little thinner, his once pristine shirt wrinkled. He held a paper bag in his hands like a peace offering. "I brought that tea you used to like," he said. Eleanor didn't smile. She didn't invite him in. She simply asked, "Why now?" Lucas shifted his weight. "Because I didn't know how to say I was wrong. And then, it got easier not to say anything at all." She stepped aside. He walked in slowly, like someone stepping into a church after years of absence. The house looked different, brighter, more personal. No family portraits, no children's trophies, just Eleanor's books, her plants, her peace. He didn't sit, just stood by the kitchen doorway, holding the bag like an apology he didn't know how to deliver. "I lost the house," he said finally. "The business folded. I'm staying in a friend's spare room." She didn't offer sympathy. "And I listened to that podcast you were on," he continued. "Twice." Still, she said nothing. "I used to think love was supposed to hurt," he said. "That it came with sacrifice. That's what I saw growing up. You always giving, Dad always away. And I assumed that's just what you were for." He looked at her then, not with expectation, but with regret. "I don't know if I'm here because I want forgiveness, or because I'm scared." Eleanor finally spoke. "Then I think you have your answer." He swallowed hard. "I'll go," he said quietly, turning toward the door. But she stopped him. "Wait." He turned back, hope flickering. She took the tea bag from his hands and placed it on the counter. Then she looked at him with eyes that were soft but unmovable. I'm not your redemption story, Lucas. I'm not a test you pass to get your comfort back. He nodded, shame flickering across his face. But I am still your mother, she added. And I will always hope you become the man who doesn't wait until rock bottom to say he was wrong. He looked away, blinking fast. She walked him to the door. As he stepped outside, she said, "Take care of yourself. And Lucas," he turned, "if you ever come back, don't bring a paper bag of tea. Bring the man you're becoming." He nodded once, and this time he did not look back. That night, she made a cup of the orange peel tea. The steam curled upward like a whisper. She didn't cry, because closure isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the sound of a door closing softly and no longer waiting for it to open again. The day Eleanor hosted her 66th birthday, the garden bloomed like it had something to prove. Tom strung soft lanterns from tree to tree, while Carla arranged wildflowers in old jam jars. The air smelled like lemon thyme and fresh soil. There was no catered food, just homemade lemonade, scones, and joy that didn't need decorating. The guests weren't family by blood. They were women from the community center, a retired teacher who now painted, a florist who had finally left her cheating husband, and a once shy librarian who now wrote memoirs. No one asked, "Where are your children?" because everyone there already knew. Eleanor's story wasn't one of loss, it was of choosing differently. As the sun set, Tom played Clair de Lune on an old keyboard, and Eleanor sat with a cup of tea, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her feet bare on the grass. Someone snapped a photo of her, laughing, soft, luminous. The image would later be posted online by Carla with the caption, "This is the woman I want to become." It was shared hundreds of times. Comments poured in. "I sent this to my mom. She needed to hear this. This is what dignity looks like at any age. I'm 67 and just moved out of my daughter's house. Thank you for reminding me it's not too late to start over." Eleanor didn't read the comments. She didn't need to. She had already lived them. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Bree. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in places. "Mom, I don't know if I have the right to say sorry anymore, but I want to say it anyway. Not because I need you to fix anything, but because I finally understand you never should have been asked to. I remember everything. I just pretended not to. Thank you for always being there, and for finally stepping away. Emma misses you. I miss you. Maybe someday you'll let her visit. No expectations, just a door that isn't locked forever. Love." Bree Eleanor read the letter twice. She didn't cry. She didn't rush to respond. She simply tucked it into her album, between photos of birthdays past and pages long since turned. Later that week, she quietly transferred a small sum into Bree's account. Enough to secure a new apartment. Enough for Emma's school supplies. Not enough to buy back Grace. Just enough to keep a child from paying the price of someone else's awakening. Tom saw the transfer alert and said nothing. He just kissed her temple and whispered, "Still kind." But not captive. One morning, Tom brought in a smooth oak plank. "I thought we could replace the door sign," he said. "Would you like it to say the Hayes home?" Eleanor paused. She poured coffee. The sunlight filtered through the kitchen window like gold ribbon across the floor. "No," she said. "Just Maggie M." He blinked. "Not even your full name?" She smiled. "The M doesn't stand for Maggie Delaney anymore, or Maggie Hayes. It's just me." That spring, at the town market, Eleanor set up a small table with pots of herbs and a wooden sign that read, "Granny Maggie's Garden, free to anyone who will love them." People stopped to ask what she was selling. "Nothing," she said. "I'm just giving away things I used to keep only for others." A little girl took a pot of thyme and said, "You have the same smile as my grandma." Eleanor knelt and handed her a sprig of mint. "Then your grandma must be someone who finally chose herself." And with that, the story of the woman who once lived in silence came to rest, not in bitterness, not in regret, but in the soft blooming of a life reclaimed. Not a mother used up, not a woman erased, just Maggie M. A name written in full light with no apology.